Miles is a special character to me. He was my motivation to begin reading comics in the first place, and my first ever physical comic was his first issue. As a Spider-Man fan, Miles being the brand new second Spider-Man was an intriguing concept. But what works so well about this is how much of Miles' story is based on that fact. A significant portion of his identity as Spider-Man comes as he is the new Spider-Man, taking over after the well-known Peter Parker, both in our minds as viewers, readers, and players, but also within the universes within these comics, animated movies and shows, and here in video games. Spider-Man has an existing legacy within our world and the world Miles inhabits when he steps into the mantle. Legacy superheroes are nothing new. The Flash, Green Lantern, Captain Marvel have existed for decades, many becoming just as, or if not more popular than the original interpretation. But for the big three, between Batman, Superman, and Spider-Man, for most of their creation, they've had other people attempt, but none have the sticking power until Miles. But that's what makes Miles as a legacy character so interesting. He isn't just stepping into the role that someone else has existed in, he's stepping into the role of one of the most iconic characters within fiction. And for so many decades, Spider-Man has been synonymous with Peter Parker. This doesn't mean Miles lives in the shadow of Peter though. Miles is firmly his own character, with enough similarities like a gifted mind and love of science, a strong moral compass created by his parental figures, and tragedy that motivates his journey, while also having significant differences in aesthetic and background, more trusting of people around him with his identity, and explored through this game is a really strong sense of community. And really, this game is about Miles stepping into his own, being New York's only current hero, and proving himself capable of the title Spider-Man, and the unique qualities he brings to that persona. And this is reinforced through the gameplay. The world is mostly the same as the previous game, as is the gameplay. It's familiar as a Spider-Man game should be, but Miles brings his own unique aesthetics and abilities to make it unique to him. As Miles both in the game, and to a lot of people viewing the Spider-Man mythos, he has a lot to prove to be worthy of the title Spider-Man.
Maybe leave a little room for the new guy, just in case.
I promise to do everything in my power to protect this city.
I promise.
You get in over your head, you give me a call. I'm here for you.
Do you remember what we lost when Roxxon bulldozed this block?
Why do we really lose touch?
New York's only Spider-Man.
Our family doesn't give up. You know that.
Whenever you say Spider-Man, you always mean the other one. You're Spider-Man. You can fix this. Protecting New York is my job.
People get stupid when they care about someone. Like you're being stupid now.
You give me strength, Miles. That's all a hero really is. Someone who's brave for the people they love.
The differences with Miles even begin at just comparing the title screens. The previous game is all about Spider-Man looking over New York City, while this we get Miles on a train. Honestly, the identity behind the mask is what they've chosen to focus on more here. And throughout the opening, we learn some key things about Miles' change from the previous game to this. Even as Miles, he's still keen on helping anyone he can on his way. He and his mum have moved to Harlem as she is campaigning for the city council there. There's a lot of love for Spider-Man here through the mural, and he's still early in his journey and doesn't have a proper suit yet, just a mask on top of some regular clothes. The opening action sequence is a consequence of the nightmarish Devil's Breath outbreak in the previous game. Peter and Miles are watching over Rhino being transported back to the raft, which of course doesn't go to plan and leads to Rhino escaping and both Spider-Men attempting to stop him. While Rhino gets the best of Peter, Miles shows his determination of not stepping down and instead discovering a new ability. Miles can absorb and use bioelectricity, which with the help of his best friend Ganke, they name Venom. After this, Rhino is taken into custody by Roxxon, a tech corporation, and the CEO, Simon Krieger, is introduced as an overly friendly guy looking to help out. After this, Peter lets Miles know he's going to be on a working vacation with MJ to Symkaria, homeland of Silver Sable, and that Miles will be New York's only Spider-Man while he's gone, setting the stage for Miles to come into his own and to be independent of Peter while he's away. Miles is both nervous and excited by the idea. This really sets up this New York for Miles' journey, and we very quickly see similarities and differences from the previous game in the form of gameplay. Web slinging around New York is very similar to the previous game. It continually is based off momentum. The more moves you pull off uninterrupted, the faster you'll be. And creatively navigating through the buildings will bring the true sense of playing as Spider-Man, combining all the different options. Web slinging, going directly into running on a wall, using web zips or web launchers, diving close to the ground before coming up and jumping out of the swing. The same addicting quality of movement from the previous game absolutely exists here, and I cannot get enough of swinging through New York like Spider-Man. In gameplay, it's most similar to Peter, but there's still some key differences, noticeably through the Venom powers. All of Miles' Venom powers are located on the L1 button, and combining that with X makes for a Venom jump. And this can be used through the traversal of New York as well, giving boosts to extend a jump or even move upwards while in mid-air. It's a small change to the overall gameplay loop, but one that utilizes Miles' new powers well, while also adding an extra dynamic element. Where Miles really differs in traversal though, isn't in gameplay, but more in animation, as the animation between Peter and Miles is very different. Peter's web slinging feels more simple, purposeful and determined. Acrobatic moves that he makes are almost solely based on speed and efficiency. After all, Peter has been doing this for years and is a seasoned veteran. Miles, on the other hand, is new to this. Web slinging is new, fun, and exhilarating, and that's reinforced through his animations. He's constantly been far more acrobatic, moving around back to front, twirling in the sky, at least much more than Peter was. It reinforces how new to this he is, but also how young he is. Miles is choosing to have fun with his new abilities, and is still learning many of the techniques for efficiency. And while the new animations are unique and give a character, the Venom jump is really the only change in the actual moment-to-moment gameplay here. And honestly, it's minimal compared to a lot of other changes in gameplay elsewhere. But hey, when something's not broke, don't try and fix it. And I'm glad that's exactly what Insomniac did here. Miles' journey as the only Spider-Man in New York begins pretty standard. He's gifted a proper suit by Peter, which looks rather terrible on him and doesn't fit at all that well. He starts working on normal everyday Spider-Man tasks through the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man app, designed by Gunke. He's working on getting used to living in Harlem and reunites with his middle school best friend, Finn. I'm such a fan of school-age Spider-Man stories, as the different aspects of life, classes and homework feel so important, especially with parents and teachers breathing down your neck, not allowed the true freedom and having to balance that with finding time to be Spider-Man. I am disappointed that in this game, Miles' schooling takes a massive backseat here. I do get why. It is Christmas, it's the holidays, and there's no school for them in it. And they also haven't created Brooklyn in-game yet, but I'm still disappointed by this nonetheless. Similarly to the first game, this game has different aspects of Miles' life coinciding with each other, and these are largely based on two main factions, Roxxon and the Underground. Roxxon is basically the evil corporation here, led by Krieger, a clearly very money-hungry person willing to be a true villain for some profit. They're developing a new form of clean energy called Newform, but it's currently unstable. And they've also built a new plaza in Harlem, which is highly controversial. Roxxon agents make up a decent amount of the villain pool, as does the Underground, a new gang taking over what was once Fisk and or the Demon Territory, with new weapons designed by the Tinkerer. Both of these groups are very visually distinct. Roxxon looking closer to Sable agents, with unique red weaponry and armor, while the Underground goes for a more punk look with neon purple. The Underground is seeking to be a new gang in New York, as feared as the Demons were, while the Tinkerer wants to use the Underground to get new form. This comes to a head at Rio Morales' campaign rally, where Miles is already facing a bit of PTSD after what happened to his dad at Osborn's campaign rally. The Underground attack the rally and steal new form, leading to a fight between them and Roxxon, and Miles suiting up and following them onto the bridge. A fight with the Underground ensues, and Miles' Venom ends up reacting with the new form and blowing up the bridge entirely. Miles does learn about his invisibility power here though, and that his old best friend Finn is actually the Tinkerer, and behind the attack by the Underground. Miles blames himself for what occurred, and the people that were hurt, as it was his Venom that blew up the bridge. Gunke points out he needs to stop thinking of himself in Peter's shadow and tackle it his way, as Miles has a bit of an identity crisis in this, thinking that if Peter was there, he would have stopped that and not made things worse like Miles did. This leads to Miles and Gunke designing his own suit in a fantastic montage. The iconic black and red suit we know Miles in, and is truly coming into his own without his mentor there. Even though the doubt of what he's caused, he's seeking to do better and help others through the way he knows how, by being himself. Another element to this story is Miles' uncle Aaron Davis, aka the Prowler, a thief who uses tech to do what he does. Early in the story, Aaron uses the Spider-Man app, and after Miles helps him, reveals he knows that it's him. Miles begins to trust Aaron and redevelop a relationship there, as when he was younger, Miles' dad found out his brother was the Prowler, and Aaron became estranged from the family. Finn and Miles and their connection is really the bedrock behind the story in this game though, as Miles juggles what he knows is the right thing to do, and his personal relationship with Finn and being sympathetic to her motivation. As Finn's older brother Rick, who Miles was also fond of, worked for Roxxon and was the lead behind Nuform. He was killed by Krieger after he wanted to sabotage and expose how dangerous Nuform was. Finn has therefore vowed revenge, and teamed up with the Underground to do it. Finn as the Tinkerer is a fantastic version of taking a pretty mundane and mediocre character from the Spider-Man mythos, and truly doing your own thing and creating a wonderful character and story out of it. Finn is sympathetic, Krieger is entirely unremorseful, painfully obvious villain, and Miles agrees needs to be taken down. But Finn has let her revenge consume her so thoroughly she's willing to work with violent gangs, and her whole goal to blow up Roxxon Plaza will lead to death and destruction in Harlem. Although she doesn't believe it, her revenge makes her blind to the reality. Miles blames himself for a lot of Finn's path. Due to being at different schools, his father, Feast, and being Spider-Man, he's been too busy to connect and catch up with Finn, and feels if he'd been more there as Miles and a better friend, this wouldn't have happened, learning painful lessons about the sacrifices being Spider-Man makes. Combat in this game is of course based off the same combo and acrobatic beat-em-up system that existed in the previous game, but it makes a lot of honestly very meaningful additions that are not only unique to Miles, but I also believe makes the combat more engaging. Animations are likewise so different. Miles feels even more nimble and honestly a bit faster than Peter. But while Peter relied on a lot of gadgets, having 8 on his weapon wheel, Miles has only 4, with 1 being very basic webbing. And even these don't have as many ammunition as Peter did, as Miles has other abilities he relies on more, largely his venom power. This is built up in a similar way Focus was in the first game, but while Peter used Focus for finishes or health, here it's used for venom attacks or health, with a different combination of venom attacks, such as a simple venom punch using square, and while that can be upgraded to knock back and stun groups of enemies, or to use venom jump and launch enemies into the air, or smash and stun a group on the ground. They replace and simulate a lot of gadgets from the first game, but in a new way. There's even a direct attack with a venom dash taking out distinct enemy, or by the end of the game, all 3 charge bars are utilized in a mega venom blast, taking out all enemies within Miles' near vicinity. And this replaces the charge up super from the suits in the first game, as they don't exist here. While there are certainly less gadgets here, there are some as they are an important part of the Spider-Man mythos, and Miles is likewise to Peter very techy. The holo drones act like remote spiders from the first game, and they are tech Peter uses, which Miles advances. The remote mines are great in stealth and for stunning and taking down groups of enemies. The gravity well was my favourite to pull a group of enemies down, making attacking others easier. The skill tree is similar here too, but more clearly broken down into combat, venom, and camouflage. These skills are very similar to the first game, with of course many of the venom and camouflage ones being new, but allows Miles to feel as if he's gaining experience through the world and has tangible and immediate benefits, and reinforces many of the combat gameplay loop. My favourite change that I hope continues into the next game, even as Peter though, is finishes being tied to combos and not focus. Every 15 hit combo rewards Miles with a finisher, and after upgrades, 2 can be stored. This makes combos have an actual tangible and direct reward and purpose throughout the combat, as before it was cool it existed, but outside of challenges, there was no actual point to the combos, and it's completely fixed here. Stealth with Miles also changes, as he can use cloaking to get much closer to enemies and out of their line of sights very quickly, and even directly go up to them for a takedown. This is on a timer though, so it adds a nice addition to the already existing stealth that was there, and especially as less gadgets for Miles to use. The remote mines are a very satisfying way of taking down groups of enemies that the first game didn't really have the same of. Overall, I feel the combat took a noticeable step up in the gameplay loop, and found it more rewarding, especially as even though I played on the same difficulty as this game, it felt a fair bit more challenging. Some of my favourite parts about this game, and the previous, is just existing as Spider-Man, doing different side content within New York. And while this New York is very similar, they cleverly picked a very different time of year to experience a different vibe. The winter time, with the layers of snow everywhere, feels so distinctly different from the first game, as well as the Christmas decoration. The world feels familiar, but not too repetitive. The world just doesn't get an aesthetic change though, so does the menu. Miles' signature black and red colour scheme is all throughout the menus here. It also looks sleeker and younger, but is also very familiar to the first game, which, much like a lot lot of other Miles designs, such as his suit and gadgets, reinforces the idea of putting his own spin on a lot of Peter's original work. While a lot of the side content is very similar to the first game, some things are already unlocked. Like the map, there's no need for fixing police towers, and every subway station is a fast travel point after a mission with Uncle Aaron. As well as Miles changes up from listening to Jameson and instead listening to Danica Hart and her Danicast, largely a younger, more Spider-Man positive version of the news. The most noticeable change in side content though, is through the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man app, which is developed by Gunke, as a new way for the citizens of New York to directly get in touch with Spider-Man to help them out. And in the game has two main features: activities, which exist as mini side missions to help out civilians. While the first game had some of this as side missions, it feels much more organic here, and there's a lot more of them as well. These can even turn into ongoing side missions, which some do, particularly ones about gangs forming and ruining things in Harlem, which turns out to be Fisk, and clearly a tease for his future return. The app also has crimes, which instead of just being based on enemy type and region in the first game, here is based on the type of crime, and can be replayed too to get the max number of tokens, through the optional objectives. Instead of just swinging around a district waiting for a set number to pop up, crimes in the first game, while I enjoyed them, were very repetitive and felt like a lot of fodder adding time for the sake of it. It feels so much more organic than not being limited to a district. The app itself is fantastic utilization of younger character within this modern world, and is a fantastic characterization of both Miles and Gunke. I love the jingle whenever anything is complete, and adds an extra layer on top of the existing map icons. It does feel a bit redundant though, as what was map icons in the first game now has to be accessed through the app, and feels a bit just like adding the same content, but going through extra menus to find it, even if the menus are great characterization. The challenges in this game are set up by Peter and are training for Miles. And while I enjoyed the Taskmaster and Screwball challenges from the first game, they are so much more improved here. First off, they are training by Peter, which feels more purposeful than anything in the first game, and act as a connection between the two Spider-Man while one is gone. The goals of how to reach Amazing, Spectacular, and Ultimate, which was largely guesswork on the fly in the first game, is given clear messaging throughout the activity for how it's achieved. And lastly, and most importantly, completing each challenge has a tangible reward added to Miles' skill set. For example, completing one of the combat challenges allows you to press triangle after a perfect dodge and do an instant takedown, something that existed in the first game but was an upgrade through the skill tree. Now, this is a reward for this challenge in this game, and there are equivalent rewards for each type: combat, traversal, and stealth, and 3 challenges for each of them. There are a couple of simple collectibles throughout the game. Underground crates is essentially Miles stealing tech from the underground to use himself. The time capsules are Miles' versions of Peter's backpack. Him and Finn hid time capsules around New York when they were younger. Miles collects them to relive the memory. It's an important part the player understand and recognizing the true connection between Miles and Finn, as their relationship is the lifeblood of this game. The sound samples are a different, more unique kind of collectible. Uncle Aaron sets Miles a quest to record sounds him and Miles' father Jeff recorded throughout the city when they were younger, to mix music to. This was more engaging than most collectibles, and was a great storytelling device between the relationship of his uncle and father and what came between them. Even if the beat it eventually makes was, well, this. The last one isn't available until after the main story, and acts as a great epilogue. For Miles' 16th birthday, his father has prepared a treasure hunt around New York, with different postcards and audio recordings. Miles' mum, Rio, finishes this for him, and brings a stronger connection and recollection on the man Miles idolizes and tries to emulate his ideals. Of course, there are also outposts. Both Roxxon and Underground have them. These aren't wave-based though, and both have mini quests when dealing with them. The Roxxon ones are to destroy Nuform reactors that could be used with Nuform to explode and be more dangerous. And Underground ones are to destroy signal blockers, messing things up in their respective areas. In the story, it's explained that Underground are using Fisk's old buildings, so a lot of these are reskinned outposts of Fisk from the first game. The story really kicks into gear when Finn learns of Miles' identity, which he reveals to stop her from killing Spider-Man. This leads to Finn not trusting Miles, as previous he had successfully infiltrated the Underground as himself to learn information, by tricking her into thinking he wanted to join and get revenge on Krieger. This trust is important, as Aaron as the Prowler has been working for Roxxon and used Miles' information about Finn to get both Finn and Miles captured by them, even though he only intended for Finn to be. Miles learns that blowing up Roxxon Plaza will blow up all of Harlem, and Finn doesn't believe him, as the rage she feels for her brother's death is being implanted onto Miles, someone she trusted who then lied to her. A physical confrontation between the two happens, Finn getting the best of Miles, Miles revealing his identity to Rio, who explains how proud of him she is, and how he reminds her of Jeff. Aaron and Miles also have a confrontation. Miles is mad Aaron sold him out to Roxxon, even though he didn't intend to. and Aaron is trying to keep Miles out of the situation and essentially wants to let the Underground and Roxxon go at it, and Miles to ignore it, completely abandoning his purpose as Spider-Man. The final confrontation at Roxxon Plaza is an emotional fight between Finn and Miles, where she successfully gets the reactor to start destroying Roxxon Plaza and many of the areas around it. Miles saves Finn before absorbing the energy from the reactor, but can't contain it and is going to let it go anyway. Finn, upon seeing the destruction of her actions and her friend about to die from them, paralleling her older brother Rick trying to stop the reactor, leaps them both into the sky so Miles can release and she can sacrifice herself in the moment. Aaron gets his moment of redemption helping the people of Harlem, then snitching on Krieger for their work together and evidence on Newform, which Aaron sacrifices his freedom for and goes to prison for a bit. Miles' story is about the people around him and their effect on him becoming his own unique Spider-Man. Rio represents the moral compass that Miles needs to aspire to. She's battling for the people of New York in her own way through the city council, the same way Jeff did through being a police officer, and the same way Miles does through being Spider-Man. And her place within the story is similar to Aunt May, though much less tragic. Gunke is more of a practical inclusion. He acts as MJ in a lot of sense, someone for Miles to bounce off of and do Spider-Man things, but also the police scanner. But narratively, Gunke is the one that inspires Miles to bring more of himself to that role of Spider-Man, not trying to emulate Peter, but using his own talent and identity to bring himself to the role. I really hope Gunke gets more characterization in the sequel. Throughout the game, Miles acts as the moral compass for both Aaron and Finn, who are on darker paths, and Miles parallels to other people in their lives. For Aaron, it's Miles' father Jeff, and for Finn, it's her older brother Rick, which reminds them of the good of these people they've lost. They believe what they're doing is in vengeance or love for them. Miles represents the morality that these people had, that Finn and Aaron have lost along the way. The people around Miles shape him. The mistakes he made not keeping in contact and working through his relationship with Finn. The distance that his father's death and becoming Spider-Man brought between them almost resulted in the destruction of Harlem. While there's certainly a lot of similarities about the characterizations and the effect that the Spider identity has on their own life, the game is about Miles coming into his own journey and effect and identity as Spider-Man. He proves himself to not only be up to the task to sacrifice himself and his interests for the greater good, but to do it in his own way. To be himself. I've heard games like Miles Morales being described as expandalone. This game takes a lot of the same assets from the first game, but changes up enough to warrant a full release. I think that's applicable here, but also this game goes so much further. It is shorter, there is less to do than the original game, but it has so much heart and soul to it. The writing is so deeply connected to Miles and building his own character and journey as Spider-Man. I was so utterly impressed with how this game took what was a solid and fun foundation in the combat for the first game and greatly improved on it, making new aspects like Venom and Camouflage flow with it, as well as having new stronger emphasis on combos, made it feel more rewarding than the first game. While the web slinging mechanically is very similar to the new animations they give Miles, they give him so much more distinct personality, for who he is as a person, but also where he is on his journey as Spider-Man, and how new to this he is comparatively. The game also has a deeply emotional story, connected to the ones closest to Miles, emphasizing his and their mistakes they make and how they affects the world around them. How Miles and Finn ultimately come to her sacrifice is heartbreaking. The game more than anything proves Miles is his own Spider-Man and perfectly sets up where his story within the wider Spider world will go in Spider-Man 2. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please leave a like, as I greatly appreciate it. Let me know what your thoughts are on Spider-Man Miles Morales in the comments below, and would you like to see more expandalone type games like this? Are you excited for Spider-Man 2? If you'd like to see more, please subscribe. Until next time, cheers and have a good one.